in American Notes and Martin Chuzzlewit. So severe was his criticism of American life and manners that the effect of well-nigh justified his own statement that he had sent them all stark, staring, raving mad across the water. In 1844 he again set forth, this time to Italy, where he spent a year embodying the results of his observations in Pictures from Italy, Dombey and Son. He wrote also on the continent, whence he finally returned to England in the summer of 1847. The next 5 years marked the culmination of Dickens' career. Never before or afterwards was his power of accomplishment so apparently without limit. During this period, besides writing David Copperfield, he did dramatic and editorial work of a degree and excellence sufficient in itself to establish his reputation as a man of infinite versatility, if not of genius. In 1847 he became manager of a company of amateur actors that presented Johnson's comedy, Every Man in His Humour, at Manchester and Liverpool. Many other dramatic performances followed. The Merry Wives of Windsor, in which Dickens played the part of Shallow, was given at Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, Edinburgh, and Glasgow. Between 1847 and 1852, the Splendid Strollers, as they call themselves, became, under Dickens' efficient training, really famous. In 1852, they presented a farce entitled Mr. Nightingale's Diary, composed by Dickens and Lemon at the London residence of the Duke of Devonshire, before Queen Victoria and the Prince Consort. David Copperfield appeared between May 1849 and November 1850. Unlike many great authors, Wordsworth, for example, Dickens was able to estimate his own work justly. David Copperfield he always considered his best book, and most critics agree with that in many respects it is the most satisfactory of his novels. While David Copperfield was in progress, Dickens carried out a plan which he had long had under consideration of editing a weekly periodical. The first number of Household Words came out on March the 30th, 1849. Thereafter he devoted an immense amount of energy to this journal and its successor all the year round. But the strain was beginning to tell upon him, and bereavement added to its weight to a heart already weary. His beloved elder sister Fanny had died in 1848. His father followed her in 1851, and his daughter Dora in the same year. Surely he must have thought, in the pathetic words of one of the characters in the novel upon which he was then engaged, Bleak House is thinning fast. It was in connection with the writing of Bleak House that the first signs of overstrain appeared. Hypochondriacal whisperings tell me, he wrote, that I am rather overworked. Spring does not seem to fly back again directly as it did when I put my own work aside and had nothing else to do. When the book was finally finished, he suffered what he described as a fearful reaction and prostration of laziness. Yet, with a heroism only less admirable than that of Scott, he spurred his flagging energies to renewed exertions. In order to provide for his children in a more substantial way than he had hitherto been able to do, Dickens in 1858 undertook a series of public readings. His decision to make the venture was doubtless strengthened by two contributing causes: his growing nervous restlessness consequent upon failing health and domestic worries. The latter culminated in 1858 when he and his wife separated by common consent. The many unsupported allegations have been made against Dickens in connection with this unhappy affair, there is no reason to question the truth of his own statement in private letters. Poor Catherine and I, he wrote, are not made for each other, and there is no help for it. It is not only that she makes me uneasy and unhappy, but I make her so too, and much more so. I have now no relief but in action, he wrote in 1857. I am become incapable of rest, so the public readings were undertaken. Of the readings, there were 4 series given in 1858 and 1859, and in 1861 to 1863, and in 1866 to 1867, and in 1868 to 1870. Into the preparation of them, Dickens threw himself with characteristic energy. No actor ever worked harder to perfect himself in this part than Dickens. How great his success was may be gathered from the testimony of those who heard him. A whole tragic, comic, heroic theater visible, performing under one hat, is the impression he made upon Carlyle, and his receipts, judged by the standards of 40 years ago, were enormous. In America, to which he paid a second visit in the winter of 1867, giving readings in the principal eastern cities, he made nearly £20,000. But no increase of fame or fortune could compensate for the loss of health and the strain of these readings entailed. In the year 1865 was the beginning of the end. The train in which he was traveling had been wrecked with the loss of many lives. From the nervous shock then experienced, he never recovered. His daughter tells us that often, when they were traveling home from London, he would suddenly fall into a paroxysm of fear, tremble all over, clutch the arms of the railway carriage, large beads of perspiration standing on his face, and suffer agonies of terror. In 1867, he suffered from an inflammation of the left foot, followed by erysipelas. While in America in that year, he contracted a severe cold, which he was unable to throw off while he remained in the country. Climate, distance, guitar, traveling, and hard work, as he said, told heavily upon him. And to add to his sufferings, insomnia visited him in all its horrors. Had he rested on his return to England, the end might have been deferred, but he worked hard at his editorial duties, his writing, and even gave a 4th series of 12 public readings in London. On Wednesday, June 8, 1870, after a busy day of writing, he fell to the floor in an apoplectic fit and died on the following day without regaining consciousness. In his will, dated May 12, 1869, he had been explicit in his directions regarding his funeral. I emphatically direct, he said, that I be buried in an inexpensive, unostentatious, and strictly private manner, that no public announcement be made of the time or place of my burial, that at the utmost not more than 3 plain mourning coaches be employed, and that those who attend my funeral wear no scarf, cloak, black bow, long hat band, or other such revolting absurdity. I direct that my name be inscribed in plain English letters on my tomb, without the addition of Mr. or Esquire. I conjure my friends on no account to make me the subject of a monument, memorial, or testimonial whatsoever. I rest my claims to the remembrance of my country upon my published works, and to the remembrance of my friends upon their experience of me in addition thereto. Nevertheless, he was buried, though unostentatiously, in Westminster Abbey. Dean Stanley preached his funeral service. Of Dickens' 10 children, 7 survived him. None of them became in any way famous. Dickens' personal appearance was interesting rather than particularly impressive. More than once in later life he was compared, because of his small, wiry frame and florid face, to a bronze sea captain. Carlyle, in a letter to John Carlyle, thus described his appearance in 1840. He is a fine little fellow, was, I think. Clear, blue, intelligent eyes, eyebrows that he arches amazingly, large, protrusive, rather loose mouth, a face of almost extreme mobility, which he shuttles about, eyebrows, eyes, mouth, and all, in a very singular manner while speaking. Surmount this with a loose coil of common-colored hair, and set it on a small, compact figure, very small, and dressed à la D'Orsay, rather than well. This is Pickwick. For the rest, a quiet, shrewd-looking little fellow, who seems to guess pretty well what he is and what others are. About his dress and manner there seems always to have been a trace, perhaps more than a trace, of the histrionic. His taste in dress was questionable. He liked glittering jewelry, showy neckwear, and gay waistcoats. But though Dickens, like Disraeli and Bulwer, was something of a fop, it would be a mistake to infer that in his dress or manners he was in any way grotesque. John Lothrop Motley, in a letter to his mother dated March 15, 1861, gives the following account of a meeting with Dickens in London. He looks about the age of Longfellow. His features are good, and nose rather high, the eyes largish, grayish, and very expressive. He wears a mustache and beard, and dresses at dinner in exactly the same uniform which every man in London or the civilized world is bound to wear, as much as the inmates of a penitentiary are restricted to theirs. I mention this because I had heard that he was odd and extravagant in his costume. What impressed Dickens' contemporaries as his dominant personal characteristic was his tremendous physical vitality. It seemed inexhaustible. Whether at work or at play, he used his marvelous store of nervous energy like a spendthrift. Hawthorne, in the English Notebook, tells a story he heard in England of a night Dickens spent in Liverpool. In the evening, he acted in farce, spent most of the night making speeches and feasting, and ended at 7 o'clock in the morning by jumping leapfrog over the backs of the whole company. Goldsmith's famous couplet, "To husband out life's taper at the close, and keep the flame from wasting by repose," had no meaning for him. Instead of husbanding his taper, he exultantly burned the candle at both ends with the usual result. He died at 58, while many men of that age, who at the beginning had possessed far less physical vitality than he, continued for years to enjoy a healthy old age. Dickens' character was what his writings would lead us to expect. The qualities of sincerity, simplicity, and kindliness are apparent in all he said and did. Whatever mistakes Dickens made, there were never such as to cast a shadow of suspicion upon his moral character. Errors of judgment there were, moral lapses there were none. Well could Carlyle write of him on hearing of his death. It is almost 30 years since my acquaintance with him began, and on my side I may say, every new meeting ripened it into more and more clear discernment of his rare and great worth as a brother man, a most cordial, sincere, clear-sighted, quietly decisive, just, and loving man. Till at length he had grown to such a recognition with me as I have rarely had for any man of my time.